I bought a Tesla and now I rent my Model Y on Turo to absolute strangers in exchange for cash. This is month 3 of the series, and today's episode I will be sharing with you all of the shenanigans that happened in the month of November. Welcome to the Investing 365 channel. Don't forget to like and sub, and let's jump right in. Let's talk about what happened at the end of October and into November. So I ended up renting my car in the final days of October to a lady that seemed a little bit sketchy just right from the start. Something was a little bit off, but I couldn't quite spot it. And so when she booked the Tesla, I didn't really think much of it. She didn't actually have any reviews on Turo, but seeing that it's a new app, I could see that, some people just never rented and it's their first time. She ended up booking it for 5 whole days. At the day of the meeting, she actually didn't end up showing up. She said she's still at work. And so after about 45 minutes of sitting out in the cold, waiting for her, I just said, you know what? I'm just gonna send her all the instructions like I do with people that I do keyless drop-offs with, and just some extra instructions of how to use the car, properly maintain the car, and all that fun jazz. And at this point, I probably could have still canceled. And the beautiful thing is Turo actually reimburses me. I believe it's 50% of the entire trip. So I probably would have gotten a few $100 with pretty much doing absolutely no work besides just going there and, getting flaked on. But I didn't want to be that guy and just kind of cancel because someone had to be at work, right? So she agreed to the remote handoff, and I sent her all the instructions and everything that she needed to kind of properly handle the car. I locked the car, I put the key inside the middle console, and I told her, hey, let me know when you get there, I'll unlock it for you, and then just take the key and, keep it with you, keep it safe. She thanked me, and pretty much I didn't hear from her for about 5 days or so, up until the day I was supposed to go and pick up the car. So I'm getting ready to go pick it up, and it's like an hour before I have to go pick it up. She texts me and says, hey, can I have it for 2 extra days? So I thought about it and said, you know what? It's a few extra $100 in my pocket, and this way I don't have to clean it, and I still get a few $100, right? So I said, why not? And I've never actually had someone request extra days like that before, so it felt a little bit sketchy, but I said, let's just do it. A couple hours into that same day, I noticed that the car on my Tesla app, I noticed that the car was at around 25, 23 miles, something like that. And I was a little bit concerned. I said, I did mention in my instructions that, you need to keep the car above 20 miles, under 20, and you're like 18 away from a charger. Do you mind please charging it as soon as you can? So that way the car doesn't die. Obviously, she would be responsible for the tow fee, but I just don't want anything to happen in between maybe scratching the car or even getting to a point where it drops to 0 and hurting the actual battery of the car, right? She said okay, and as soon as she got off work, she went and charged the car, and that made me feel a little bit better about having her as a client. And just remember, this is the second time that I asked her to do this, because at the beginning of the trip, I also asked her, and now 5 days later, I'm asking her again after seeing, I deliberately get under that mileage. Remember, she doesn't have to go to a supercharger. She can also charge it at home, and she has a garage at her house. So she could have definitely taken the initiative and charged it overnight. I just think she was being lazy. And again, no judgment there, but there are some people out there that just don't take care of things as well as you'd like them to. So 2 days go by.
2 days later.
And again, I get another text message an hour before I go pick it up that she had asked to extend it for another 2 more days. And at this point, I found it pretty odd for someone to do this. She could have just booked it for about 4 days out. But this time I did mention to her, I said, look, I'm more than happy to rent it out to you for another 2 days, but please, please, please make sure that you have it above 20 miles. And I even mentioned the charger in the back of the car one more time, just in case she didn't read the first text message. I said there is a charger that you can charge it at home and make it really easy for you to not have to go to a supercharger every single day or every other day to charge it. And the really weird thing is, when she did go to the superchargers, I noticed she only charged it for like $2 or $3 at a time. So that means she's charging it for literally 5 minutes. And that means she's showing up to the charger with like 20 miles, putting just a few bucks into the car, which means she might be leaving with like 50 or 60 miles and then going about her day, which is ridiculous. But I made sure to have her verbally agree to charge it above 30 miles and keep it above there just to play it safe instead of the original 20. And especially when it comes to pickup, I want to have at least 30 miles so I can get home and charge the car, or even get it to a supercharger instead. She was really nice about it, and she apologized because she was running late for work and said she won't let it happen again. And that was that. And it was at this point where, after I agreed to letting her rent it for 2 more days, I started reading Reddit horror stories about people doing this to other Turo users. And what ended up happening in a lot of these cases is people felt bad for doing some damage on their car, and instead of confronting that person or telling them or seeing, what could be the remedy for this, what they would do is they would book 2-3 days at a time for like a few weeks. And what these people ended up having to do is, raising their prices on the Turo app for, days ahead, and or denying the requests that, they had sent in, just kind of being like, sorry, I need the car, or something like that, making up some kind of excuse, right? And for me, I don't have that kind of excuse. So I did the same thing. I actually, after reading these horror stories about, get people getting their cars damaged, I went ahead and on my calendar for the next 2 days, I upped the price to double, and said, there's no way she's gonna pay, an additional like $200 per day to rent my car. And I didn't want to completely deny her because maybe I was just being paranoid. I don't know. These are just some horror stories that I was reading on Reddit. So a lot of what I was feeling was just kind of a gut feeling, and what I was reading online, and all that kind of stirring in my head about, this could be a possibility, just didn't sit right with me. So I kind of want to make sure that I got my car back, just to at least investigate what even happened during this trip. So 2 days go by.
2 days later.
And I'm finally going to pick up my car. And this time she didn't text me, so I assume she didn't want to book another trip with me, which is fantastic because that's exactly what I wanted. And as I'm driving over, I get a text message from her that says, everything is fine except the windshield is damaged or broken, and I'm at work, so I'm sorry, but I can't be there for the drop off. But if this story can't get any better, the cherry on top was that the fact that she left the car at 0 miles, and literally I could just turn on the car and it said, don't drive the car, get it to a charger immediately to avoid any battery damage. And that was really devastating because I told her countless number of times to keep the car above a certain percentage, especially during the cold, right? The cold actually can affect the battery and have you have less miles. So if she had like 20 miles on a warm day, if it turned cold the night before when I was going to pick up the car, it could also drain the battery. And the car actually notifies you of this as well. So it wasn't just me telling her this, it was also the car itself. Every time it was cold, it would pop up with this message. And the really crappy part was, not only was she not there to talk to me about it, but the closest supercharger was about 12 miles away. As far as Turo goes, they were pretty easy to talk to. There were a couple of hiccups, and I wish they would explain things better because it wasn't 100% clear. And the person that I talked to, maybe I just got unlucky on that specific day, but that person was really, really new. And I could tell it was pretty much their first day because every single time I had a question, and just basic questions, like how was the process, they would have to put the phone call on hold, talk to their manager, get back on the phone. And I wish they would have just maybe handed the phone off to their manager and just listened to what they would have, probably suggested to me, or, how they would have approached the whole situation and answered all my questions, versus just doing that back and forth, because I was there for like maybe 3 or 4 hours, just pretty much wasted my day. And I believe that time is money. And for me, it felt more of a hassle to do this. On top of that, I didn't even know what was going to happen until like 2 or 3 days after this whole incident occurred. So I pretty much had a broken car and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, besides the fact that, I had to get it repaired. But aside from that, I didn't even get assigned a case manager to my Turo incident for like 2 or 3 days. Right? And after that, it was really hard to get in contact with them. They closed my case a few times and then I had to reopen it. So it was really complicated. I think a little bit more complicated than it should have been. But here are the big downsides. I have a list for you guys here. So the big downsides were, I had to take down my listing for about 3 weeks until my windshield was absolutely fixed. And even after that, technically the bookings don't start, filling up on my calendar until the listing's on there, and some people have time to look at it and plan their own trips. So realistically, almost 4 weeks where I didn't have a single booking. The other downside is that Tesla is the only company that repairs that type of windshield as of right now. Now there are outside shops that will do like the Model 3, the Model X, the Model S, but because the Model Y is so brand new, that Tesla is the only one that can fix the 2020 and future models as well. The other downside is that the payment was $1,300. Luckily, Turo handled all of that. Again, I had to pay it up front, but then they fronted me the money a little bit later to cover the costs of that payment. That wasn't super bad, but like I said, Turo, you gotta up your game on the communication thing, and also instead of taking down a listing, you gotta find a way where people can book, maybe a little bit further out, especially for minor things like a windshield, right? A windshield might only take maybe a week or 2 to fix. And so you guys should be able to kind of help hosts keep their car on Turo somehow without completely taking down their listing for 3-4 weeks at a time. The biggest thing that made me kind of lose faith in humanity and all of this is after the fact, she actually offered to pay for this incident. She said, how can I pay? What's the easiest way? And Turo said that the easiest way is actually to have the customer pay for it instead of going through insurance. Of course they're going to say that, but they did say that this is the best way to handle it. So I asked her, I said, hey, if you wouldn't mind, after she offered, of course, if you wouldn't mind to pay for it, that would actually be really great. This is what Turo suggests as well. And as soon as I said anything, she completely ghosted me. She didn't say anything like, hey, I'm sorry or whatever. I can only pay $200. She just completely vanished and pretty much probably fled the app, because I also did end up after that, rating her a 1 star. I wasn't going to rate her a 1 star. If she actually ended up paying for it, I would have said, this happened. It's not her fault. It could have been an accident. But the fact that she, did this sketchy thing where she lied about what happened, she kept on booking the trips, and at the end of it all, she offered to pay, but then completely vanished into thin air. Another thing is she actually ended up lying that she was the only person driving the car, because after looking at my driver profile settings, I noticed that there were actually 3 people that weren't registered to drive on Turo that she had and kind of let drive. It's actually easy to add a profile on Turo and have them drive as long as they have a driver's license, and you're going to take full responsibility if something happens under their wing per se. But the thing that irks me a little bit is that there were 3 different profiles and none of that was communicated to me, so I had no idea. And also it wasn't communicated to Turo, so it kind of felt wrong that they even allowed her to come onto this platform. But how do you screen for that? I don't know. Maybe this is, kind of just a big misunderstanding and accident, but from my perspective, she wasn't a good human being and they shouldn't allow her to come back onto the platform ever again. As far as if you're wondering how I got the car back to a full charge from 0, well, the supercharger was 12 miles away and a little bit of that is uphill, so I probably wouldn't have been able to get there, but I did a little bit of Googling and found out that the Tesla might have a battery buffer within the battery built in. So, if it says 0 miles, you might have some mileage. And then I also was able to find one normal charger about like 4 or 5 miles away. So I pretty much just inched the car. Like we're talking like going like 5 to 10 miles per hour on like a 20 and 30 mile per hour road, just inching it towards a regular charger in the hopes that, if I get it up to like 30, 40 miles, then I can drive it to a supercharger after the fact. So I ended up doing that, and luckily we made it there. I had my fiance just driving, at the time she's my girlfriend, but she was just driving behind me the entire time just to make sure that I get there safely, and if I had to pull over, might have had to tow it, right? And the towing charge is about $350, so I kind of wanted to avoid that. And again, if I would have had to tow it, I would have had to tow it myself. And I asked the customer service department at Turo. They said if that were to happen, technically the cost would fall on her, but because she ghosted this whole situation and Turo and me, pretty much I am SOL and I'd have to pay out of pocket. Luckily, I didn't have to go through that. So that wasn't all that bad, but it definitely scared the living piss out of me. So thank goodness and thank you Tesla, Elon Musk, for putting that extra battery buffer in your guys' cars, because people like that exist, and I've never personally had my car go below probably even like 70 miles, but that's just me, that's how I roll. And for most people that drive these cars, they're probably unfamiliar with that. It takes a little bit more responsibility than a gas-powered car, right? Gas, you can just go and, there's a gas station down the street, but with electricity, it's a little bit harder unless, you park it by the house. But again, because I dropped it off to her and picked it up from her house, I had to make sure that there were enough mileage. I communicated that. I did what I could do, but at the end of the day, it was on her. And it just sucks to see that people like that do exist, but they do. And, you can't vet them all out with a simple, criminal background check or anything like that. Okay, so there you have the reality of being a Turo host, but don't go yet because I haven't shared with you guys the November update as far as how much money I actually made in November. So even with the 3 to 4 week setback, at the very end of November, I had one booking that paid $428, and after all the costs associated with the car wash and everything, I was able to walk away with $408 even. And so the expenses were just $20 for the car wash, and like I said, I have towels, I have everything, vacuum, everything that I need to pretty much clean the car. I bought it in bulk in episode 1, so I'm pretty much covered there for another couple months before I have to restock on that. So essentially in November, I made $408. even with this whole mishap that happened, end of October, beginning of November. So hopefully the takeaway that you get from all of this is that Turo isn't as easy of making money as people make it out to be, and not always are you going to be profitable month after month after month, even though we were pretty consistent for the last 2 months about making a decent profit. This month, on the other hand, wasn't the case.